CFB 900 live from Monday night. And now, 100 Seconds or Less, Bobby and I are going to cover for you what we took away from this past Saturday. We'll look ahead to the current market movement, and we'll give out two best bets on a couple of totals that we like. So, Bobby, we're on the clock. Let's get into it. First things first, big game Bo Perbula from Penn State, looking pretty good from Missouri.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he impressed as a passer, going 30 of 39 for 334, 2 touchdowns, and one of the more exciting games of this past weekend, a true back and forth there. Obviously, so at Penn State prior, he was more of a gadget quarterback, wildcat, things like that. And we had concerns about him running an offense fully, right? Oftentimes, I don't pay too much attention to the FCS opponent in week one. I know they played Central Arkansas. He looked great. Obviously, the backup Horn got hurt as well.
Right.
That kind of gifted him the job a little bit, because that was a camp battle. But honestly, like against Kansas, he made a ton of great throws and brought them back to win that game. I mean, they were down, with 5 minutes to go there. So honestly, if Perbula can keep this up, Mizzou has the schedule to put up some W's on the season and maybe be a CFP playoff team, which is something I would not have thought prior to the season, because that defense I still think is quite good. They allowed points to Kansas, but we've talked about Daniels. We like him too, so I don't think that's a bad performance, but more impressive on Bo's end.
Takeaway number two, Mays mishap. Bryce Underwood's staff around him and just did not look great at Oklahoma. Oklahoma gets the easy win and cover.
Yeah, that was one where honestly, like that game didn't feel as close as the final. Oklahoma could have easily won by more there. Michigan had some breaks and still lost by 11 there. So ultimately, like I do think they hit on Bryce Underwood. You're seeing those signs there. It's his first road start. Big Saturday night primetime environment. Like he's going to continue to grow. Like he's clearly got all the skills. The issue is, quite frankly, I think he needs more help from not only his skill position players. I mean, you've heard, Bud Elliott of Cover 3 be very critical and, say whether, hey, are these receivers like the same as Iowa's? And he's made fun of them for being like MAC level receivers at times. So they don't have a ton of skill position talent there. I do like the running back Hayes, but, but I also think he just doesn't get a ton of help from Sharon Moore, the head coach, the offensive coordinator, Chip Lindsey. I'm lukewarm on at best. But like, honestly, like, as I kind of think about what the next couple of years are for the Maize and Blue, I'm really concerned that like if they're going to end up wasting kind of this quarterback talent, while you have them here for the next 2-3 years, obviously they should be able to keep them in NIL, but they should be able to do big things. And there's some concerns there. I'm not quite sure about Sharon and what that offense looks like if they can really develop him.
Takeaway number three, Boston College gets the cover, doesn't get the win, but offense looked pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually probably the game on Saturday night I watched the most of, like live, just and whatnot. But yeah, Dylan Lundgren, the transfer from Alabama, obviously he was recruited by Bill O'Brien at Alabama and then brought him over. So that's always a good sign. Generally speaking, won the job from Grayson James, he's nothing, like very good. He won that job, but honestly, this BC offense looks really good. He shows NFL arm talent for sure, accuracy, processing well. The Eagles were the better team on Saturday night, despite the loss in overtime there. Boston College is going to be a pesky underdog in ACC play as we continue through the year. Obviously, big number at Stanford, terrible spot. Back-to-back travel late night, but so maybe not this week, but BC's a team that you definitely want to look to back the remainder of the season.
Takeaway number four, we're starting to think maybe Kansas State has the old Irish flu, kind of like Florida State from last year. Kansas State looked pretty bad the last 3 weeks, honestly, losing to Iowa State, the no cover against North Dakota, and then obviously on Saturday, losing outright as a 17-point favorite to Army.
Right, and that's an Army team. Obviously, we bet under the win total on, so we were on track with after the Tarleton win, but now we lost one there, so we're probably right where we should be with that one. But yeah, that's a really disappointing effort from Kansas State. I mean, there's something going on there. I think I joked privately to you that I wonder if Florida State and Kansas State shared the same locker room in Dublin, so that I know I could find out who has that locker room next year and find out who's cursed. Because it's kind of one of those things. I mean, Kansas State's been a team who has traditionally played above their like record wise to their above their like talent level. Like if you just look at recruiting rankings, things like that. But if they're not going to do that this year, I mean, you got to question whether this team makes a bowl. Something's not right there. So really concerned about Kansas State. They got a big game Friday night against at Arizona. It was a team I kind of liked a little bit in preseason, but like, you know, you really got to wonder, you know, before you bet Kansas State, like, have you seen the bottom? And I know with teams like this, like I want to see some sort of similar to Florida State last year. You want to see some sort of like life before you're like, okay, I'm ready to back them again. But so yeah, I'd want no parts of Kansas State for a little bit.
Takeaway number 5, Bob Chesney's boys definitely could have won at Louisville, but what was most impressive in the takeaway from us is the play in the trenches.
Yeah, and I know you've heard about it on a couple other shows, but I think it just speaks to, you know, I mentioned cover 3 earlier, but it just seems like a takeaway that everyone's had is how well JMU performed in the trenches at an ACC opponent. Obviously, like, you know, 28-14. I know that landed like right on the number. The books kind of middled that one, or got middled in that one. Kind of a bad luck push. If you took, you know, just 14 with JMU, I mean, like you said, they could have easily won that game outright. But something I take away, and it's kind of a dual thing, obviously, in the JMU side, like you have to consider that's a real defensive line on that side. Or is it Louisville having a bad offensive line? Or is, quite frankly, probably the answer is probably a little bit of both. I know going forward, I have circled opponents that have a good pass rush going against Louisville for the rest of the year. And then you have to think of, okay, in the Sun Belt, if JMU is going to have a D line like this, you know, how is anyone going to really score on that? You know, just that just gives you such an advantage on the defensive end or defensive side in the Sun Belt. So proven to be a good favorite, or rightful favorite in the Sun Belt, even though I know Texas State, you know, took care of business against UTSA as well. So
final takeaway from Saturday: Bobcats getting the W against West Virginia.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little Ohio, not Ohio State here. But yeah, the Bobcats, and ironically, those teams do play this week. But they've been a team that the market has sold in the win total market 2 straight years. I mean, they've had a ton of turnover. They've been just gutted in the portals. Tons of guys going up to P5 programs. They're taking transfers in from FCS programs, filling out the roster. Obviously, had a coaching change this year with Tim Alvin going to Charlotte. However, they continue just to show that they're the upper class in the MAC, at least in terms of at minimum, coaching and development. They've played 2 Power 5 opponents to start the year, and they've competed or won in 2 different ways. Against Rutgers, obviously Navarro flashed. Rutgers' defense appears to be a bit down, but that kept them in the game. And honestly, like, if it wasn't for a block punt, they could have beaten Rutgers in that night in Piscataway. And then against Rich Rod in West Virginia, and that weird like Big 12 team coming to a MAC school, even though it's an easy trip. Navarro threw 3 picks. Like, the defense dominated an offensive head coach in Rich Rod, holding them 2.6 yards a rush and doubled them up in yards, 429 to 251. And as you see, Ohio won the game by 7. Like, this game could have been a blowout even further in the favor of the Bobcats. I mean, that's just a huge effort. Obviously a MAC contender for sure, and a team that the market hasn't gotten right for 2 straight years, but definitely a team you want to look at once we get into conference play on those Tuesdays and Wednesday nights in November.
All right, week 2 in the rearview mirror. Let's look ahead to week 3, and let's go live with the board here. Bobby, what games are you most interested in? Where do you want to get started?
Yeah, I'm actually going to start with the home field shirt I'm going wearing. We'll go to 131 Georgia, Tennessee. I know that one's opened right around 7, and we've seen it obviously painted across the board right at 3.5. Clear Tennessee buys. The market seems to be downgrading Georgia off a couple laissez-faire performances against FCS, Austin Peay, and Marshall. Personally, I've kept them stagnant PR-wise. I know we've talked about the well-publicized ATS trends with a Z, by the way, in this case, says that Kirby Smart doesn't cover games when he's a 38-plus point favorite or whatever it is. So if that's the case and he doesn't want to run it up and there's this long trends that he does this, why are we downgrading Georgia significantly just off data about, expected margin, things like that? Like, I don't know if you should for that, if there's something concerning UC, sure, downgrade them for that. But I don't know if you should for those reasons. I've kept them stagnant. I do think we might see some Georgia buyback eventually, but that's been a strong, aggressive mood there. Obviously, some upgrades to Tennessee as well based on their performances.
The buyback has to happen at 3, right?
Yeah, I'll click Georgia 3.
Yeah.
Instant. If you see Georgia 3, that's a click. Next, we'll skip around. It's already up there. Clemson, Georgia Tech, 6.5 down to 4. Obviously, a big downgrade at Clemson. Continued concerns about Clemson's running game and their offense. That we talked about after the LSU game. It came up again against Sunbelt team Troy. They were down in that game and had to come back to win. So it's a clear downgrade. You really have to decide if it's the bottom or not. It's really hard for me to buy Georgia Tech at this number, a team I liked in preseason, although a lot of people did as well. Also, I'm really interested in, and this is something we might talk about a bit later, the trenches matchup between the Tech offensive line and the Clemson defensive line and how that could affect this game. So we'll talk about that one a little bit later, I think. Next one, let's go to the backyard brawl right next to 133 on the rotation board. I'm just calling out one of them here. Pitt, West Virginia. Saw a buy on Pitt. Obviously, we talked about Ohio earlier, selling West Virginia out. Pitt was a team who I circled preseason that I liked what they had up front, like they're one deep, if you will. They're starters, but I thought, hey man, if they accuse some injuries, like they could be a sell in the second half of the year. Well, we're still in that early portion of the season. I still think Pitt's a buy. Honestly, similar to how they were last year. But yeah, West Virginia is a team that's going to be better near the end of the season. But yeah, I thought Pitt from 4 to 6.5. I thought that was a good steam earlier today in that one. Next, 135 still on the board. Washington State, North Texas. I thought that one had some really good two-way action. North Texas was open 4. I saw some of that earlier. Got bet out to 6. Then Wazoo buyback. So I think this is just where this game's going to live now. An interesting kind of cross-conference matchup. But again, it's another Wazoo trip leaving the West Coast, which they do a ton this year. That's not normal for them. Last one, 149. USF Miami. Starting to see some 18s on the board. I thought that was a buy at 17. I know a show gave that out earlier today. Totally agree. Horrid spot for South Florida coming off, a program defining win in the swap, which begs the question, what do they have left in the tank? Also, with just how the G5 playoff spot is, you have the win in the swamp against Florida. That's a pinnacle win. You have the G5 tiebreaker super win against Boise. Right. You don't need this game. All you need to do is win the American now. You need to get out of this game healthy and avoid a dumb loss later. But in reality, you could maybe even take one with the Boise win and all that. You just have to win the American. Not saying they're going to pack this one up, but this is a huge game for them. I laid it with Miami at 17.
And not like Miami's sleeping on South Florida now.
Right. Yeah. It's just a pure wake up. It's a pure wake up on that one. So like South Florida, but their goals should now to be just win the American and you make the playoff.
All right, to wrap up the show, got 2 best bets for you guys. We went 1 and 2 last week in our best bets. That brings us to 3 and 4 on the season, but we're looking to bounce back, and it's definitely a long year. Bobby, can you tell us a little bit about this total in Clemson, Georgia Tech?
Yep. Mentioned that we were going to bring it up again. Yep. We'd like the under 54 in Clemson, Georgia Tech. Again, I talked about the trenches matchup there a little bit. Georgia Tech a little weak on the offensive line, even though that's Frank Key's specialty. And we really like Buster Faulkner, the OC at Georgia Tech. But Hayes King precautionary, didn't play much or at all really against the FCS opponent last week. So backup's competent, but again, concerns about the Clemson offense. So we like under here, the total 54 in Clemson, Georgia Tech. And the other one, FIU, FAU, we're going to go over 58.5 in that one. This one is, I think the total is a little bit suppressed because of both teams' performances against the Power 5 opponents they played. FAU played Maryland, had a ton of turnovers, and then FIU got shut out at Penn State over the weekend. But then against both FCS opponents, which honestly are a little bit closer to their team quality, they're both putting up 40 points. So FAU obviously got Kitley, the old Western Kentucky and Texas Tech offensive coordinator, as the head coach. They're keeping pace. They're passing a ton. I think both teams are going to score. I think this total realistically should be like 61. So we'll take, or maybe a little tick higher. So we'll take over 58.5 in FAU, FIU in that one.
That'll wrap up tonight's show. You can join Bobby and I back here on Wednesday night. You can follow Bobby on X at BobbyDigital2. You can follow the show on X at CFB900. We really appreciate you guys. Feel free to give us a comment, like, subscribe. It gives Bobby and I feedback on how we're doing. Very much appreciate you guys listening to the show. We'll see you guys Wednesday night. Adios.